when Karen, the ruthless HOA president, starts demanding unfair extra fees and threatens my family. Our quiet neighborhood turns chaotic. Desperate to fight back, I take a stand. Will I be able to reclaim peace without everything falling apart? Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe if you want more HOA stories. Living in Maplewood had always been a dream come true. The streets were lined with beautiful houses, each with its own charm. My family and I loved our home. The big oak tree in the yard, and the friendly neighbors who often greeted us with smiles. Life was simple and peaceful. But everything started to change when Karen was elected as the HOA president. At first, I thought it was just another person taking on the role, making sure everyone followed the community rules. Karen seemed nice enough, always attending meetings and talking about keeping Maplewood beautiful. However, soon I noticed she was different from other HOA leaders I had heard about. Karen began to enforce rules that felt unnecessary. She would come to my house to inspect my fence, even though it was already within the allowed height. When I hosted a small barbecue for friends, Karen showed up to remind me about the noise regulations. Even though it was just a friendly gathering, it felt like nothing I did was ever good enough. One sunny afternoon, I received a letter from the HOA. My heart sank as I read the fine print. Karen had decided to increase the HOA fees by a significant amount. She claimed it was for additional community improvements, but nothing concrete was explained. I talked to my neighbors, and many of them were upset too. We didn't understand why the fees were going up so much without a clear reason. I always paid my dues on time, believing in the community spirit. But this extra fee felt unfair. I thought about paying it to keep the peace, but something inside me resisted. It didn't sit right that we were being charged more without proper explanation. After discussing it with my wife, Lisa, we decided not to pay the extra fee this month. We hoped Karen would reconsider when she saw that we weren't easily intimidated. The next HOA meeting was tense. Everyone gathered in the community center, waiting for Karen to speak. As she took the podium, her confident smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice firm. "I know the new fees are a change, but they are necessary for the upkeep of our neighborhood." I raised my hand, standing up slowly. "Karen, I've always paid my dues on time, but this extra fee seems unreasonable. Can you explain what these additional funds are for?" Karen's face flushed with anger. "These funds are for essential improvements," she snapped. "We need to maintain the quality of our community, and everyone needs to contribute fairly." The room fell silent. I could feel the eyes of my neighbors on me, some nodding in agreement, others looking unsure. Karen's tone was sharp, making it clear that she wasn't open to discussion. "If you have concerns, please address them privately," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. After the meeting, I returned home, feeling uneasy. When I opened the door, a small folded note was slipped under it. I picked it up and read it carefully. "Pay the extra fees or face the consequences." It threatened, signed simply, Karen. My stomach churned with fear. Was Karen really going to go this far? I showed the note to Lisa, who looked worried. "We need to take this seriously," she said. But I remained calm, knowing that reacting with fear wouldn't solve anything. Over the next few days, Karen's behavior only got worse. She started showing up at our house unannounced, inspecting every corner for any minor violations. She criticized the color of our mailbox, the placement of our garden gnomes, and even the way we hung our Christmas lights. Each visit was more aggressive than the last, making it clear that she wasn't going to let us off easily. Our neighbors began to feel the pressure too. Friends who once enjoyed chatting over the fence now kept to themselves, afraid of Karen's wrath. The sense of community we cherished was slowly being replaced by tension and fear. I decided it was time to take action. I started by researching the HOA's rules and regulations. I spent evenings going through property maps, legal documents, and previous meeting minutes. I wanted to understand exactly what Karen was doing and if there was any way to challenge her decisions. My goal was to protect my family and our home without causing more conflict. One night, I found a loophole in the HOA bylaws. It seemed that the extra fees Karen was imposing were not clearly defined and lacked proper justification. Excited by this discovery, I decided to gather all the evidence. I printed out the relevant sections, highlighted the inconsistencies, and organized everything neatly. This was the first step towards standing up against Karen's overreach. I shared my findings with Lisa, and together we approached a few trusted neighbors. We explained the situation and showed them the evidence. To my relief, several of them had similar concerns about the extra fees and Karen's aggressive tactics. We formed a small group dedicated to addressing the issue, knowing that strength in numbers could make a difference. The first 10 seconds of each act are crucial, and tonight was no different. As I walked into the kitchen, ready to discuss our next move, Karen burst through the door, her face red with anger. I hear you've been trying to undermine my authority, she shouted, eyes blazing. You can't just ignore the rules and expect everything to stay the same. I took a deep breath, staying calm despite her outburst. Karen, we're just trying to understand the reasons behind the extra fees. We want to comply, but it needs to be fair and transparent. Karen didn't back down. She grabbed a folder from her bag and waved it in front of me. This is a community we're talking about. If you can't follow the rules, then you're a problem. Feeling the tension rise, I knew I had to remain composed. We're not trying to cause trouble, Karen. We just want to ensure that any changes benefit everyone and are clearly communicated. But Karen's frustration was palpable. She slammed the folder onto the table, papers scattering everywhere. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just pay the fees, and we can all move forward. As she stormed out of the house, I looked at the scattered papers, realizing that this confrontation was just the beginning. The pressure was mounting, and I had to find a way to protect my family without escalating the situation further. Determined to find a solution, I decided to reach out to a local community group known for helping residents with HOA disputes. They provided valuable advice on how to present our case effectively, and offered support in organizing a community meeting. With their help, I felt more confident in our approach. In the days that followed, we gathered more evidence, including testimonies from other neighbors who had faced similar issues with Karen. We documented every interaction, every unreasonable demand, and every extra fee that lacked proper explanation. Our goal was to present a united front, showing that Karen's actions were not in the best interest of the community. One evening, as I was reviewing our evidence, Lisa came into the room with a concerned look. I think we're making progress, but Karen is not going to give up easily, she said softly. We need to stay strong and keep pushing for what's right. Her words resonated with me, reinforcing my determination to fight for fairness. I knew that standing up against Karen was not just about the extra fees, but about preserving the harmony and trust within our neighborhood. It was about ensuring that our voices were heard, and that no single person could impose their will unfairly. The first 10 seconds of each act are crucial, and I made sure every meeting, every conversation started strong. Whether it was presenting our case at a community gathering or discussing strategies with the local support group, I kept the momentum going. Each step brought us closer to confronting Karen and reclaiming the peace we once enjoyed. As the weeks passed, the tension in Maplewood grew. Karen's overbearing presence was felt everywhere, but so was our growing support. More neighbors began to join our cause, sharing their stories and standing up against the unfair fees. The community started to rally together, united by a common goal: to restore fairness and transparency to our HOA. One afternoon, while organizing our documents, I received a call from a local news reporter. They had heard about the tension in Maplewood and wanted to cover our story. This was a significant opportunity to bring public attention to the issue. I agreed to meet with them, hoping that media coverage would put additional pressure on Karen and the HOA board. The reporter arrived with a friendly smile, setting up her camera in our backyard. "Can you tell us what's been happening here?" she asked, her interest evident. I explained the situation, presenting the evidence we had collected. The reporter listened intently, nodding as I spoke. "It sounds like there's a lot more to this than just extra fees," she commented. "We'll make sure to highlight your concerns and the impact Karen's actions have had on the community." Feeling a surge of hope, I knew that this was the breakthrough we needed. With media support, our voices would reach a wider audience, and the pressure on Karen and the HOA board would intensify. It was a risky move, but I believed it was the right one. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows over our once peaceful streets, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The fight against Karen was just beginning, but with each step, we were closer to reclaiming our neighborhood. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face whatever challenges came our way, driven by the desire to protect my family and our community. In that moment, I realized the true strength of unity and the power of standing up for what's right. The road ahead would be tough, but with the support of my neighbors and the growing momentum of our cause, I felt more hopeful than ever. The battle against Karen was not just about extra fees. It was about preserving the heart and soul of Maplewood for generations to come. The morning after the mysterious note arrived, I woke up feeling uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. As I sipped my coffee, I glanced out the window and saw Karen standing in my yard. Her arms crossed and a stern look on her face. My heart skipped a beat. I knew today wasn't going to be easy. Karen had always been strict, but lately her behavior had become unbearable. She would come by unannounced, inspecting my lawn for tiny weeds or checking the paint on my fence. It felt like she was always looking for something wrong. My neighbors started to notice too. They began to stay away, afraid of Karen's outbursts. The once friendly neighborhood was now tense and silent. One afternoon, as I was fixing a small leak in the kitchen, Karen burst through the door. "I need to see your receipts for the last 3 months," she demanded, her voice sharp. I tried to stay calm. "Karen, I've always paid my fees on time. What's the issue?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed my paperwork and started rifling through it. My wife, Lisa, came into the room, looking worried. Our kids played quietly in the corner, sensing the tension. I took a deep breath and said, "Karen, please. There's no need to go through our personal papers." Karen slammed the folder shut and pointed a finger at me. "You think you can just ignore the rules? This extra fee is mandatory." Her eyes were filled with anger. I felt trapped, not knowing what to do next. That night, Lisa and I talked about the situation. "We need to do something," she said softly. "Karen is making our lives miserable." I agreed. The next day, I decided to reach out to a local community group that helps with neighborhood disputes. They welcomed me and listened to my story. They suggested gathering evidence of Karen's unreasonable demands and trying to find out if she was following the HOA's own rules. I started by collecting all the emails and letters Karen had sent me. I also took pictures of my property, making sure everything was up to code. I researched the HOA guidelines, comparing them to Karen's requests. It was time to fight back with facts and proof. As I worked on my case, Karen's behavior only got worse. She began showing up at odd hours, inspecting my property for minor issues. One evening, she came over while my family was having dinner. "I see you've planted those new flowers. They don't match the HOA's standards," she sneered. I tried to explain that the guidelines were clear, and that I was following them, but she wasn't listening. Feeling overwhelmed, I decided to talk to my neighbors individually. Many of them shared similar stories about Karen's overbearing attitude. We realized we weren't alone, and that Karen was targeting several of us unfairly. This gave me the courage to continue fighting back. One weekend, I organized a meeting with the neighbors at my house. We discussed our experiences and decided to present our case together at the next HOA meeting. It was time to show Karen that we stood united against her unreasonable demands. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. As we entered the community center, I saw Karen already there, her presence dominating the room. She looked around, smirking, confident that she had the upper hand. I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Karen, we've all been affected by your strict enforcement of the rules. We believe some of the fees and inspections are unfair and unnecessary." Karen stood up abruptly, her face turning red. "How dare you speak against the HOA?" "I'm just trying to keep our neighborhood in order." Her voice was loud and aggressive, causing some neighbors to feel uncomfortable. I continued, presenting the evidence we had gathered. Emails, photos, and testimonies from other residents. The room was tense, and I could see the frustration in Karen's eyes. She tried to counter our points, but the evidence was overwhelming. Just as it seemed like we might make some progress, Karen made a shocking announcement. "I'm scheduling a surprise inspection next week. If any of you can't comply, you'll face serious consequences." The room fell silent. This unexpected move felt like a final attempt to intimidate us. As everyone left the meeting, I could see the worry on my neighbors' faces. We needed a new plan and fast. That night, I sat down with Lisa and our kids, trying to figure out our next steps. "We can't let Karen push us around," I said firmly. "We need to protect our home and our family." Lisa nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Maybe we should get legal advice or bring in a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes." The next day, I contacted a local attorney who had experience with HOA issues. She listened carefully to my story and reviewed all the evidence we had collected. "It looks like Karen is overstepping her authority," she said thoughtfully. "We have a strong case here. We can challenge the extra fees and her aggressive enforcement tactics." Feeling more confident, I shared the news with the neighbors. They were relieved to have professional support and agreed to move forward with legal action. We decided to also reach out to a local news station to bring more attention to our plight. If the public knew what was happening, Karen might back down. As the weeks passed, Karen continued her relentless inspections. One evening, she showed up at our house again, this time with a stack of new regulations she claimed were mandatory. "You need to update your property immediately or face penalties," she demanded. I felt my patience wearing thin but stayed calm. "Karen, we've already addressed several of your concerns. These new regulations weren't part of the original guidelines." Karen wasn't satisfied. "I have every right to enforce these rules," she snapped. The tension in the air was thick, and I knew this confrontation could change everything. I glanced at Lisa, who gave me a reassuring nod. It was time to take a stand. I decided to take photos of the new regulations and compare them to the original HOA guidelines. It was clear that Karen was making things up to justify her extra fees and harsh penalties. Armed with this new evidence, I felt ready to confront her once more. The day of the surprise inspection arrived, and my anxiety spiked. I knew Karen would be looking for any excuse to fine us. As she walked around our property, I calmly pointed out the discrepancies between her new rules and the official HOA guidelines. Karen, these regulations aren't part of the HOA's approved documents. Where did you get these from? Karen's face paled for a moment, then hardened. They're new rules. The board decided to implement them, she replied, though I knew that wasn't true. I had the legal documents to prove otherwise, but Karen wasn't backing down. She continued to search for faults. But without the proper guidelines, her efforts were futile. Frustrated, Karen finally admitted, "Fine, but this isn't over. I'll make sure the board sees how difficult you are." Her words hung in the air, and I could see the defeat in her eyes. It was clear that her tactics were no longer effective. With the support of my neighbors and the legal team, we filed a formal complaint against Karen. The HOA board began an investigation into her actions, reviewing all the evidence we had presented. The community started to rally behind us, sharing their own stories of Karen's overreach. The pressure on Karen was mounting, and she began to lose her grip on the neighborhood. Just when we thought things were turning around, Karen made one last desperate move. She threatened to take legal action against me personally, claiming that I had violated our agreement by not paying the extra fees. This unexpected twist added another layer of complexity to our battle, but it only strengthened our resolve. Determined to protect my family and our home, I worked closely with the attorney to prepare our defense. We organized all our evidence, including property maps, legal documents, and testimonies from the neighbors. The community's support was unwavering, and together, we were ready to face whatever came next. As the days went by, the tension in the neighborhood eased slightly. Karen's influence was waning, and the HOA board was taking our complaints seriously. The local news coverage also helped to keep the spotlight on our situation, ensuring that Karen couldn't easily dismiss our claims. One evening, as I was reviewing our case with the attorney, Lisa reminded me of the importance of staying calm and focused. "We've come so far," she said softly. "No matter what happens next, we've done the right thing." Her words gave me strength. I knew that no matter the outcome, we had stood up for ourselves and our neighbors. The battle wasn't over yet, but we were closer to reclaiming our peaceful neighborhood. In the midst of all this, a surprising ally emerged. One of Karen's own supporters came forward, admitting that Karen had been acting out of her own frustrations and fears. This revelation shifted the dynamic, showing that even within Karen's circle, there were cracks in her authority. With this new information, the HOA board decided to take decisive action. They suspended Karen from her position as president pending a full investigation. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that this was a step towards resolving the conflict. The morning sun peeked through the curtains as I woke up, feeling a mix of hope and anxiety. Today was the day of Karen's surprise inspection. I had spent the past weeks gathering all the evidence against her and rallying the neighbors to support our cause. My heart raced as I prepared for what was to come, knowing that this could be the moment everything changes. I double-checked my documents one last time, making sure I had every interaction with Karen recorded. My wife, Lisa, and our kids watched me with worried eyes, but they trusted that I was doing the right thing. "You've got this," Lisa whispered, giving me a reassuring smile. I nodded, taking a deep breath to steady myself. As I stepped outside, Karen was already there, clipboard in hand, with a stern look on her face. "Ready for another round?" she sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I remained calm, remembering all the times she had pushed us to our limits. "Yes, Karen. Let's go through everything step by step," I replied, keeping my tone even. The first 10 seconds were crucial. Karen began pointing out minor issues, things that didn't even matter. She moved around my yard, scrutinizing every corner as if looking for something to blame. I stayed composed, answering her questions honestly and showing her the evidence I had collected. The neighbors watched closely, some whispering to each other, sensing the tension in the air. Suddenly, Karen found a small crack in the fence and started exaggerating its importance. "See this? This needs to be fixed immediately. Or else," she threatened, her face red with anger. I took out the property map and legal documents I had researched, explaining that the crack was within acceptable limits and didn't require any repairs. "According to the city regulations, this is perfectly fine," I stated confidently. Karen's frustration was evident. "You're just trying to get out of paying the extra fees," she accused, her voice rising. I shook my head, presenting more evidence that showed her demands were unreasonable and not in line with the HOA's guidelines. "I'm not avoiding the fees. I'm just following the rules that apply to everyone," I clarified, hoping to reach some common ground. The neighbors began to murmur, their support for me growing as they saw Karen's overbearing behavior. Just then, A reporter from the local news station arrived. Having heard about the ongoing HOA tensions, "What's happening here?" the reporter asked, sensing the story unfolding. I quickly explained our situation, showing the evidence and highlighting how Karen's actions were unfair. The reporter started asking questions, capturing the confrontation on camera. Karen's anger intensified as the media attention put her under pressure. "This is my community. I won't let you ruin it with your selfishness," she snapped, her eyes darting nervously around. I could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that public exposure might be the key to stopping her. As the inspection continued, I noticed other neighbors stepping forward, sharing their own experiences with Karen. One by one, they began to speak up, validating my claims and showing that Karen's behavior was not isolated. The room filled with voices united against her, making it clear that her control was slipping away. Karen, now visibly shaken, tried to defend herself, but the evidence and testimonies against her were overwhelming. She grabbed a heavy branch from the ground, her movements desperate. "If you don't pay the fees, I'll make sure everyone knows you're a troublemaker," she threatened, swinging the branch towards me. Panic surged through me, but I stayed calm, remembering the advice from the community group. "Karen, please, let's talk about this," I pleaded, trying to de-escalate the situation. But her grip tightened, and I knew she wasn't going to stop. The reporter captured every second, the tension mounting as it seemed like things might spiral out of control. Just as Karen was about to lash out, the police arrived, alerted by a neighbor who had heard the commotion. They quickly intervened, calming Karen down and ensuring everyone's safety. The room fell silent as the officers took statements from everyone present. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing that the immediate threat was over. The media coverage of the incident spread quickly, bringing more attention to our neighborhood's struggles with the HOA. The story went viral on social media, with many people sharing similar experiences and supporting our fight for fair treatment. The pressure on the HOA board increased, forcing them to take a closer look at Karen's actions. A few days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting to address the issues raised by the incident. The board members were under immense scrutiny, and the community demanded accountability. I stood before them, presenting all the evidence and testimonies that had been gathered. "Karen's actions have created a hostile environment for many of us," I stated firmly. "We need a leader who listens and respects everyone's rights." The board members listened attentively, the tension in the room palpable. After a long discussion, they decided to conduct a formal investigation into Karen's conduct. The neighbors watched eagerly, hopeful that justice would finally be served. Karen, realizing her position was untenable, stepped down as HOA president, her power stripped away by the collective will of the community. With Karen no longer in charge, a new election was held for the HOA board. The community came together to elect leaders who were committed to fairness and transparency. The new board members promised to implement better communication and ensure that all voices were heard. The sense of relief and unity was palpable as we saw the positive changes taking shape. In the weeks that followed, our neighborhood began to heal. The extra fees were retracted, and the HOA rules were reviewed to prevent future abuse of power. The neighbors who had once been silent now felt empowered to speak up, knowing that their concerns would be taken seriously. The sense of community was stronger than ever, built on trust and mutual respect. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I realized how important it was to stand up for what was right, even when faced with overwhelming opposition. The support from my family and neighbors had been crucial, showing that unity could overcome even the most entitled and overbearing individuals. I felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that our efforts had made a real difference. One evening, as I sat with Lisa and the kids on our porch, watching the sunset over our peaceful neighborhood, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had been through a lot, but we had emerged stronger and more united. The experience had taught us the value of resilience and the importance of fighting for fairness and justice. The media continued to follow our story, highlighting our victory and inspiring other communities facing similar challenges. Our neighborhood became a symbol of what could be achieved when people come together to stand up against injustice. The bonds we had formed during the struggle only grew stronger, creating a tight-knit community that looked out for one another. As time went on, the memories of the conflict with Karen began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and optimism. The lessons we learned stayed with us, reminding us to always advocate for what is right and to support each other in times of need. The peaceful days returned, but the strength and unity we had developed would always remain. In the end, the fight against Karen taught us that no one person should have too much control, and that everyone deserves to be heard and respected. Our neighborhood thrived, becoming a place where fairness and kindness were the guiding principles. I looked around at my happy family and supportive neighbors, feeling proud of what we had accomplished together. The journey had been long and challenging, but it had brought out the best in all of us. We had faced adversity with courage and determination, proving that even the most entitled and overbearing individuals could be overcome through unity and perseverance. Our story became a testament to the power of community and the importance of standing up for what is right. As I watched the children playing in the yard, laughing and carefree, I knew that we had created a better future for them. The struggles we endured had not been in vain, and the peace we had fought for was now a reality. The lessons learned would guide us in maintaining the harmony and respect that defined our neighborhood. Looking back, I realized that the experience had changed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. I had grown stronger, more confident, and more committed to ensuring that our community remained a place where everyone felt safe and valued. The fight against Karen had been difficult, but it had ultimately led to a brighter, more united future for all of us.